the 21st of March 2022. Hi everyone, I'm Dana Durnford, also known as the Nuclear Proctologist.org. Thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you're having a good day. Hi everyone, Stephen Young. Hi Stephen. Dana Nasana. Hi Dana. Obsoletes. Hi Obsoletes. And anybody I can't see. Port Angeles. There's somebody hiding behind that, but I can't see who it is. It looks like there's somebody hiding. That's the problem on my end. Belated hello to Colette. I didn't see her name last night. Let's get on with it. We got a really good show tonight. We're going to pick up last night's show tomorrow night or another night because I'm still editing it down. It's a lot of work, and this folder has been ready to go since Sunday or Saturday, so we need to get this out of the way. Japan's earthquake losses, which was March the 16th last week, that was right off the coastline. March the 16th was right off 45 miles away from multiple nuclear meltdowns. It shook the whole country. And that's Japanese scale you're looking at, which is 1 to 7. So let me go back to this one. So all of these numbers, and I'll put them on the big screen, are on a scale of 1 to 7. 1 to 7. But this one really tells the story. The epicenter, an upper 6, which when you convert it over to the Richter scale, it's a 9.4. which would make sense for this headline here. Japan earthquake loss is likely to go into the billions. Into the billions. This was from last week. And what that means is very severe. The economic bill of the earthquake that struck off the coast of Tokyo, which it wasn't off the coast of Tokyo, it was off the coastline of Fukushima, is likely to be in the billions. It did shake Tokyo. So it was 45 miles away from destroyed reactors. And that's reactor 4, what's left of it, that's reactor 3. So they built a shell around it, doesn't physically touch it. They put this cab on it and then pretend that they were inside getting fuel out of a building that actually doesn't even exist, just a stump of it. And in 2013, they done the same thing with this building where they built a structure around it, pretended that everything was normal. You can see all the different media. Many more than that. It was the world's media done this. A lot of them actually pretended they were there. Then the anti-nuclear controlled opposition like Arnie Gunnarsson and Helen Caldicott claimed the building to the left was the real building, not the one to the right.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of building 4, and it does look pristine.
Well, you can't remove debris from the top of a building that don't exist. Okay. So I missed the screen capture of the headline. On Saturday, the 18th, it's Friday or Saturday, they had a 5.5 on Japanese scale of 7. So 5.5 on Japanese scale is an 8 on the Richter scale, close to the same area. intensity of 5 plus. So it was 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, 5.8, 5.9, 5.9. And Japan's 1 to 7 intensity scale, it was 20 kilometers deeper than the March 16th, and it was an 8 on the Richter scale. And so they downplayed that one. That one just barely showed up in the news for a few hours and disappeared again. Hi, everybody. Port Angeles, Darren, James, Richard, Albert, Peaceware. Just in case I missed anybody. Just keep it rolling. We got a poll today. Is the nuclear industry, the universities, and media cover-up of the Fukushima nuclear fallout criminal? Is it a crime to hide what had happened? Because it affects all humans and all species around the entire planet within 40 days in a life-threatening way. No one was given the opportunity to shelter in the place where the big plumes were coming into Canada, United States, Mexico, the entire planet. It wasn't just North America. Is it a crime to pretend, for mainstream media on national TV, to pretend that they're in a fuel pool on top of a building that doesn't actually exist? Is that now the reason that should be considered a crime? Currently, apparently, it's not, and there's no one to prosecute them because same as Helen Caldicott coming out and saying it looks like that over there, not like it actually looks, which disarms the entire population. So is that a crime? We have a staggering 20 votes with 100%. Hell yeah, dog. That's a crime. Radiochemical analyst. Now this was February 2022. This was last month. This was published. A radiochemical analyst of the drain water samples at the exhaust stacks. Remember, they chopped a chunk of one down. The exhaust stacks themselves, 25 feet off the ground, are lethal doses. Right? And that's how they gave you the measurement. If you got lethal doses, you can't get close enough to quantify that as 25 feet off the ground. Because just say it was 25 feet off the ground, it's still a lethal dose to anybody on the ground. So there's no way they can state that it's just off the ground, which is still, it's a lethal dose. It's actually many tens of sieverts. 5 is considered a lethal dose. Followed by the severe accident at Unit 1, 2, and 3. So now they're pretending that Reactor 4 didn't happen. And that's what they're going to do in this study.
Standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4.
And they're all going to do the same thing. I'm not going to play it right now. They're all pretending they're on a building that don't exist. Followed by the severe accident in Unit 1, 2, and 3. So they ignore Reactor 4. Well, they didn't ignore it. As I showed you just now, they actually covered it up, right? The radioactive gas of Unit 1 of the Fukushima Dai-ichi Nuclear Power Station was released from the exhaust stack. So they're talking about venting shared by Unit 1 and 2 through the venting line. They actually have a venting line where radioactive emissions are always... See, they build these tall, skinny stacks on site. That's for venting. Radiation. So 100% crimes against humanity and all species. In the present study, radiochemical analysis of drain water samples at the drain pit of the exhaust stack was conducted to study radionuclides released during the venting of Unit 1. That's Unit 1. Well, what's left of it. Unit 1 was actually 1 million sieverts. 5 to 10 is considered a fairly quick lethal dose. 10 to 20 sieverts in this environment is a lethal dose right away. And imagine what 100 sieverts, it's going to kill you from 100 feet away. So what is 1 million going to do? Well, you can't get back on the site. So they went through thousands, they murdered thousands of homeless minimum. Furthermore, slight differences in cesium, 135 and 137. And it's not very often they'll mention the word 135 cesiums. Isotopes ratio was reported for the area mainly contaminated by Unit 1. Which is really interesting because Unit 1 was 1 million sieverts outside of it. But you had multiple reactors blowing up and melting down. It's impossible to point the finger whether it was reactor 4, reactor 1, reactor 2, reactor 3. It's impossible. It's ludicrous. Well, in one sense, you can isolate out reactor 3 because that was the mixed oxide fuel. That was much more lethal. Well, a normal meltdown, which there's nothing normal about this, by the way, because it's such a lethal entity. Nuclear meltdown of a typical reactor, according to the American government's web sites, the emissions are 1 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. A mixed oxide fuel facility like Reactor 3 at Japan I'll bring up a picture for Reactor 3. Reactor 3 is 1 billion times 1 billion more lethal, the elements, because it's already gone through a chain reaction once. It's demonic to put it through a chain reaction again. It was actually illegal in the United States and Canada to do it. Britain, scumbag Britain does it. Don't touch the keys, Dana. Done it again. My apologies. In the present study, drain water samples at the drain pit of the exhaust stacks were analyzed of 1 and 2, reactors 1 and 2 that are completely gone liquefied, liquid reactor core, uranium cores, was analyzed to obtain the information. Well, first off, you can't get near the stack to do that. About components and chemical species of radionuclides released by vent of Unit 1 of cesium-134, 137, and 131 iodine, which is not supposed to exist anymore unless there's a recriticality, are the important fuel pools of severe accident analysts because of their relatively high volatile and radioactivity. The biggest byproduct of radiated fuel is curium isotopes. That's why they call it a curium core when it melts down. And the curium isotopes need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Iodine-131 was decayed out due to its short half-life. So when you hear iodine-131 from these people, that's typically a nuclear apologist. By the way, the explosion at Reactor 1 was caused by damage from the quake. It was melting down and before the tsunami hit the site, it was releasing huge amounts of toxic radioactive fallout. The exhaust stack was shared by Unit 1 and 2. It's considered that the vent of Unit 2 was failed since the outflow side of the ruptured disc in the vent line of Unit 2 was not contaminated. First off, there's zero possibility Unit 2 wasn't contaminated. Second off, you can't get close enough to these pieces to quantify that assertion. It can't be done. It's a lethal dose. Third and fourth, no nuclear scientist or academic have ever visited the site, which you might think of as a conspiracy theory. But how can you possibly get close to a massive nuclear meltdown? Are you special? Are you better than everybody? Is that what's going on? The vent line of Unit 2 was not contaminated. This is mad because they're planning on deceiving the population later this year them to believing that they're taking the fuel out of Reactor 2 fuel pool. So on a March 16th earthquake last week of 2022, the media was reporting that the fuel pool in Reactor 2 was stable. Now you can't nobody's physically got into Unit 2 since the nuclear meltdowns because it burnt continuously for several days. By the way, Fukushima Unit 1 and 2 exhaust stack was reported on September 18, 2013 at dose rates measuring over 10 sieverts per hour. These are lethal doses right away. That's 3 years later. And the inside of the exhaust stack was mainly contaminated by the vent of Unit 1. So they're setting the stage to claim that they're going to get all the fuel out of the pool of Unit 2 and all the fuel out of the pool of Unit 1 this year or next year or something, because that's what this is all about. Just like they allegedly done for Reactor 4, they allegedly got all the fuel out of that in 2013, but they couldn't get into the control room until 2019, which is far away from that, by the way. And also they claimed last year on the anniversary, they got all the fuel out of Reactor 3 fuel pool that doesn't even exist, was detonated. That explosion was felt 25 miles away, and those emissions covered the entire planet. This model is only a 20-day model. And the model is basically on venting, as they're claiming there. It's not madness, it's insanity. Drain water was sampled in September the 12th, 2016. This is a lunatic society. What really makes it disgusting is you never stop growing food and murdering and shipping it worldwide. This is dirty bombs. You feed that to your loved one, they get sick and die. It's not a game. You know, right after the nuclear meltdown, seniors were urged to eat radioactive rice to help the murdering farmers and to protect the young people from the murderous, degenerate, scumbag Japanese farmers. These are scumbags. They should be assassinated on sight. Anybody's doing that, harvesting food right alongside a nuclear one-ton bags, thousands of one-ton bags of nuclear waste, doesn't deserve. That's mass murder on a whole different scale. Tokyo, at 29 million becquerels a square meter in the soil after a single rainfall. This is absurdness numbers. You're not supposed to be in Tokyo, period. 36 million people are supposed to leave Tokyo. So the nuclear industry is insane. That's the definition of insane, is keeping people in that environment. Not insane, but actual evilness. Another study showed 276,000 becquerels a kilogram, multiplied by around 68 to get the square meter, like the size of your dinner table, was at 18 million becquerels a square meter. Again, these are insane numbers. And notice becquerels, which is the atom's pulse in energy every second. Unisieverts is the millisieverts, microsieverts, stuff like that. You can't, they don't call these bags microsieverts, they're becquerels per kilogram. Atoms, pulse, and energy, different. But they're only measuring gamma emitters, not measuring alpha, beta, neutrons, just gamma, which is brutal on its own, but nowhere near as bad as the neutrons. And there's going to be more neutrons than gamma. So 919,000 becquerels a square meter in the Tokyo area soil. Just airborne radiation of 4,000 becquerels a kilogram of in the fog. Again, this is cesium, which is just gamma. They're not measuring all the emissions and the emitters. And that's an evacuation zone, those types of numbers. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. So if your children are walking to school in that fog, that's they're guaranteed permanent illnesses and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. That's going to destroy the rest of their lives in increments over the next few years. It'll start to manifest. 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible heart damage. 50,000 becquerels a kilogram radioactive cesium, which is gamma. Again, you won't hear them, well, you will, but it's pretty rare, where they'll typically only talk about gamma. That's the definition of murdering and evilness on a whole different scale. It's stupid to do that, because your children and your friends and your family can't escape it. 50,000 becquerels a kilogram, you're going to multiply it by 68 to get a square meter. From the side of the street where children walk to school every day. Officials sharply raised radiation levels for residents to get iodine pills after the meltdowns by 75 times higher than the scum degenerate WHO, which is the World Health Organization, which is United Nations, which is 193 militaries, not countries, but militaries, recommended for children. 75 times higher. So there would be no panic. So the parents wouldn't try to evacuate the children from the danger. So the nuclear industry can go home and look their loved ones in the eyes and pretend that they're human. Because they're not. Humans don't do stuff like I just showed you. As far as I can tell, everybody in the nuclear industry should be arrested and locked up. What's the crime? They're part of the nuclear industry. Which means they're sociopaths, psychopaths, and they are vicious, disgusting parasites. They are predators on our species and our loved ones. Radiation health specialist children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems. What part about that is it that you can't wrap your minds around on this planet? I'm not talking to the regular people, obviously, but to the rest of them. Health specialists in radiation and health specialists, children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium, which is just a gamma, nasty at that, start to see health problems. The food they're shipping from Japan, they're claiming is around 100 becquerels a kilogram. It's obviously they're not checking it. It's obvious they're not even, and they're even admitting that they're not checking for alpha, beta, or gamma in your food that your loved ones are going to consume and be bioaccumulating it all the time. This is 11 years of crazy idiocracy, murder. This is genocide on a whole different scale. And so they put tarps over the bags. The bags are only meant to last a couple of years. There's around 60 million total, 150,000 sites like that originally. IAEA today admits there is no such thing as a safe level of radiation. And that the allowable radiation, and the IAEA is United Nations, 193 militaries. Also, as George Bush Sr. calls them, the New World Order. The allowable radiation standards are based on benefit, not safety. In other words, they're based on natural stuff, not the man-made. So we need a few million people to hunt them all down and to prosecute them. They're already guilty. What should be their sentence? There's such evil. The nuclear industry is such evil people. It's hard to wrap your mind around how actually evil these people are, unless you hang out here for a few days.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
United Nations. Renewable gamma showing. Two sieverts an hour of better radiation emitted from a single liter of water, which means the tanks are around 1.4 million sieverts, which means you can't physically stand up there because the tanks need to be around 10 feet thick to stop the gamma shines, the X-rays, the neutron bursts. And now they're in paper suits. TEPCO says he burns 7,000 paper suits a day in the incinerators. Single-use suits, paper suits, at a nuclear meltdown using paper suits. So the tanks are there to trick you and deceive you, manipulate you into thinking they didn't cause the radiation to flow into the Pacific Ocean. And they got all the world's media to convince you too. All the universities, all the academics. There's nothing they won't do for their monster, demonic master, the nuclear industry. So this other study was external dose, 2013 study. External dose, external, not internal. This is absurdness in a whole different scale. This is what they done for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was only external doses. And for 76 years, they refused to acknowledge or 75 years, they refused to acknowledge that the survivors inhaled radiation, and that if they did, it wasn't enough to harm you. And so for 75 years, he refused to provide health care or acknowledge that that's not true and that they got a brutal dose and that they were also breathing it in. The reason they done that was because if they admitted that an internal dose happened and had any adverse side effects, they wouldn't have been able to rebuild Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the bomb craters. Do you know why they have fences around all the other bomb craters around the world? Because it's not safe to be there. There's not a nuclear test site, a genocide site, aka nuclear test site, on the planet where you can go with your Geiger counter and your Geiger counter won't freak out and tell you to run. External dose estimation system, which is probably even scarier, for Fukushima victims, also known as residents, after the Fukushima Dai-ichi Nuclear Power Plant event, also known as an accident. And here's the people that I think should be staked out on an ant's nest, should have a curling iron shoved up their rectum, and just be left there. National Institute of Radiological Science, and also them too. The National Institute of Radiological Sciences, also known as NIRS, developed the external dose estimation. The National Institute of Radiological Sciences, instead of doing their job, they came up with the cover story. And you think you live in a society? You think you live you think there's a humanity on this planet? You're dreaming. So, the National Institute of Radiological Sciences external dose estimation, external dose. The system being used in the Fukushima Health Management Survey on top of that. So the standards for the victims is based upon a deception. And a terrible one. But the very people that are funded by the taxpayers to do the opposite, to protect the people. Captured immediately, probably created by the nuclear industry themselves as controlled opposition originally. Now used as a weapon of mass destruction against all of humanity and certainly the people of Japan. That's not a crime? You're dreaming. The estimates, external doses varied from around 1 to 6 millisieverts, not becquerels, not atomic decays like you're supposed to, but something appropriate for being close to the nuclear reactors themselves. That's what millisieverts, microsieverts, unisieverts, sieverts is actually good for. It's not good for the atomic emissions that are floating around. So what happens, because I know this is complicated for people, is the radiation, E equals mc squared, think of it as not as millisieverts, because that's not what's going on. It's atoms, and you breathe in some of these atoms, or they land in your food, or your water is sitting there, they're landing, you pick your water up and start consuming it. Or you're washing your food and eating it, or you're boiling your food and eating it, or you're getting a shower and sucking it up, or you're doing your laundry and your clothes now is pulsing energy, destroying your DNA and your chromosomes and many other things in your body permanently. Your pillows, your blankets, your children's pillows, their blankets, gets contaminated. Because that's what's going on worldwide as we speak. So that's what this is. Bear with me here. So that's what that is. That's the radiation plume. It's radioactive fallout. Some of the numbers were 220 million atoms per liter of rainfall. So the system of external doses, not internal, is being used in the Fukushima Health Management Survey. Oh, and food, by the way, too. The maximum dose in 18 evacuation patterns was estimated to be 19 millisieverts. Not atomic decays. Like I showed you earlier, Tokyo at 29 million atomic decays a second after rainfall. Not millisieverts, not microsieverts, not unisieverts, but becquerels, which is atomic decays a second. Radioactive fission product leaked out. I showed you the buildings. The buildings are completely gone. The word leak was used right away, by the way. National Institute of Radiological Sciences started to develop the external dose estimation systems for the Fukushima residents at the end of March, 11 years ago, 2011. External dose estimation. On the other hand, Fukushima Prefecture government and Fukushima Medical University decided to perform the health management survey for all Fukushima residents at the end of May 2011. External doses only. That's the definition of evil. That's the definition of disgusting and despicable, reprehensible, murdering people. Was considered to be one of the necessary data for the health management. By not looking at internal, which is what you're supposed to do, it's hard to imagine that this is real. And it's even harder to imagine that this was the bar for whether it's radioactive or not. They went this route. And then the NIRS, National Institute for Radiation Sciences, external dose estimation system was adopted in the survey. But a prefectural government and a Fukushima Medical University. Used as a weapon of mass destruction against his very own people. They closed down 54 nuclear power plants in Japan, and none of them volunteered to go to Fukushima. Because only the homeless and the victims of society and immigrants who don't speak the language are tricked and deceived and manipulated going there. It's a coward society, isn't it? That's a coward society, yeah? It's a despicable society. of governments and universities and academics and journalism. That part of your society, I should say. This paper describes the Nuclear Institute Radiological Sciences external dose estimation. Estimated the external effective dose for the first 4 months after the Fukushima Dai-ichi Nuclear Power Plant event. Regard to the dose rate map, since maps for the first 3 days are based on the SPEEDY simulation. SPEEDY had ran over 5,500 simulations in just the first few months. And it refused to release the documentation. All of this was paid for by the Fukushima taxpayers. Reliable data, the source term reported by the government. So the victims paid to be murdered. External dose estimation. To the right, you'll see the cities, minima soma, which we know was 10 to 20 million per kilogram, which needs to be multiplied by 68 to get a square meter. So Fukushima City, Lydiat Village, Tamura City in the green, is the green right here. These are in millisieverts. I'm sorry, not even millisieverts or microsieverts. Even worse, in unisieverts. Subhumans. That's what you got for universities, academics, governments, and the nuclear industry is a subhuman species that should be taken and experimented on instead of animals, using animals for experiments. They should use these people. The body size of a function of age is also considered because the external effect of external, the ultimate betrayal is what you're hearing tonight. Effective dose depends on the body size even in the same radiation field. The dose rate maps have the data of effective doses for adults external, which is still not even close to being accurate. First off, they're only using gamma. They're not using alpha, beta, neutrons. So body size corrections considered for children less than or equal to 15 years old by using age coefficients. These are perpetual liars. How can we trust an academic again? I certainly can't trust a scientist or a journalist. Academic or a professor or something like that. That can't be done. You can't repair that damage. I have just absurd amount of contempt for these people. Unmitigated on top of that. Uncontainable contempt. That's being polite, by the way. The behavior data of the residents for each day can be obtained as follows. Place to stay, time of stay in the buildings, I'll explain to you, times to stay outside the building, type of building, whether it was wood or steel or cement, or time of the move to I plus 1 from point A to point B, evacuation type. So the dose calculation is, this is how crazy this industry is. It's external only, even though you can't breathe without ingesting it. And then they're so in order to get the lowest number possible, they say, well, he's only outdoors for 2 or 3 hours a day. They're indoors. They're getting less of a dose. That's what they're doing. It's impossible to equate that to a normal person. That's the behavior of a murderer, of a lunatic, of a dangerous sociopath and psychopath. That's not normal. That's craziness. People like that should be put down immediately when they're discovered. You got all the evidence you could ever want. They write these studies, these articles, these videos. The daily dose rate maps were constructed based on 2 kinds of data. One is hourly effective dose rate external maps simulated by SPEEDY, with the source term calculated by Meltdowns Code 10 by the Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency, NISA, which was used between March the 12th and the 14th. By the way, not the 15th, not the 16th, but between March the 12th and the 14th. The radiation hasn't had time to spread too far yet. See? Get what they're up to? As a result, the effective dose, as a result of 100% propaganda, the effective dose for adults, rate maps, blah, 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 date and division numbers, respectively, were obtained between the 12th and the 14th of March. They only encompass a tiny, tiny fraction, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent. Here's a map of fallout from France, the projection based on 16 days. It covers the whole planet in 16 days. If you let the map run, that projection run for another couple of days, and we have the numbers to quantify that on top of that. But the National Institute for Radiological Sciences external dose estimation system for Fukushima residents have it down to that area only. For external, of course. In unigrays are the same as unisieverts. It's the same dose. Other measured data, and why would they do grays back in 2011? That was discontinued after Chernobyl. Why did they, in 2013, when they produced the study, revert to using, and that was meant to confuse the average person that might have wandered and accidentally found the study. So these cities and communities that they're talking about are in unigrays, which is the same as unisievers. They even got minimum soma at 0.05 unisievers an hour in Iwaki City. The doses were absurd, were tens and hundreds of thousands more than what they're showing you. But and the dose is only calculated for external. The institutions that you created and funded, and you gave them the authority, the monetary, the education, the equipment to warn the population, when you have the event, they ran around with sharp knives cutting everybody's throat they could find and laughing about it. You think you live in a society? You really think you live in a society, do you? Because I got no illusions about it. We don't live in a society. We're not even considered human to these people. According to the previous study, I use that word with nothing but revulsion. The main radionuclides emitted from the Fukushima Dai-ichi were the xenons and technetiums. Iodine-132, which rarely gets a mention, by the way, which is 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands of animals and insects and birds, mammals and humans than the iodine-131, which is unbelievably effective. And there's 10 times less iodine-131 than there is of 132. There's actually 30 times more iodine-133 for every 131 that's produced. The 133 also has those attributes of being 9 times to 10 times more effective at ionizing and radiating thyroid glands than the 131, which is unbelievably. But it also, the thyroid gland now takes those elements, those anthropogenic man-made elements, and converts it into radioactive hormones, which is insidious, by the way. It's the very concept of iodate, taking iodine before an accident, is specifically to avoid doing that. And technetium-99 and technetium-132 and 129, but you would have found, now xenon-133 is one of the accurate ones. Yeah, there's technetium-132, 129, but the technetium-99 is an absurd amount being created from the corium, from the meltdowns. The calculations of effective dose, the external effective dose is calculated for 3 different situations: staying indoors, outdoors, and moving from one place to another. I can't possibly articulate how much disgust and disrespect I have for these people that produced the study. I can't possibly articulate it. It's actually against the law if I try to. External dose. I'd spit in their face if they were in front of me immediately. Whatever I can get my hands on would be bashed off the side of the... Oh, let's not say that. Which these people should be thrown off a skyscraper. Actually, they should be sent into the nuclear meltdowns to perish. When one stays indoors, the dose reduction should be considered, really. The wall's got to be at least 4 feet thick to protect you indoors, by the way. The dose reduction should be considered because buildings have shielding effects against radiation exposure depending on their materials and thicknesses of the walls. All of that is meant to downplay what the external dose. No internal dose study with them. This is what the health effects is calculated on for the whole population, 2 million people. I think those 2 million people should grab these people and just tear their arms and legs off on the spot. You don't need no trial. That was used to murder your loved ones and your friends and your families and your planet and destroy everybody's future. You're horrific, heartless, soulless creatures. You're not human. Don't ever call yourself humans again. In the external dose, for the calculations from the 12th to the 14th of March. So they wanted that before it traveled too far, then they left it at that. Then everything is predicated upon that deception itself. At 10:15, Japanese Standard Time on the 14th of March, the explosion of the building surrounding Reactor 3, the building surrounding Reactor 3. What they're saying is, it just doesn't seem possible that people could be this cruel and this soulless and heartless and genocidal. This is genocidal. Well, there is no surrounding building. Building 3 was completely destroyed, and the reactor cores are completely destroyed, and the fuel pools that are stuffed because they don't have a repository to contain the fuel is destroyed. And I know that because, and you can believe this because I say it. But just to be safe, I'm going to provide all kinds of documentation like I do every fucking day in every single show. Apologize. I'm not here to be a blogger. I'm here to educate people. I can't do that without providing the documentation. You can't provide the documentation without being at this constantly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year after year after year after year, and staying on top of it. In the hopes that the world will come up with solutions of how do we exterminate those people that done this to us. How do we do that? They built a fake structure, moved it to the site with cranes, and then pretended they were in a building that actually doesn't exist. You tell me that's not evil? Then there's something wrong with you. As with the Unit 1, the top section of the reactor building was blown apart. Again, what they're doing is setting the stage so that somewhere in the next couple of years you can pretend they're going to get the fuel out of Unit 1 too. Like they've been doing for Unit 2 for the last week. That liquefied, burnt continuously for several days. You can't get inside the building. You never will. You can't. Or it would have been done already. The explosion was larger than the Unit 1 and felt 40 kilometers away. When you feel an explosion 40 kilometers away from a single building, there ain't going to be any building left. That's what they're talking about, Unit 3. That's what it looked like originally. They gutted it with cranes and homeless and the destitute, not academics or scientists or universities or nuclear corporations. Victims only allowed. Water injection continued. Dose rates of 0.05 microsieverts an hour were recorded in the service hall and 0.02 microsieverts at the plant entrance. There is nowhere on the site where you're going to get that low of a number. There's nowhere in the prefecture where you're going to get that low number. There's nowhere in actual Japan where you will actually get that low of a number. And the stakes are humanity and 8 million species. Which side will history remember you for, I wonder? Fukushima Dai-ichi Nuclear Disaster Unit 3 Reactor. This is the Wikipedia site. That's not Wikipedia. I think I was looking for the date that blew up. I didn't screen capture by the looks of it. On May 11th, TEPCO, which didn't exist at that stage because it was nationalized and it went bankrupt, the government took it over, released underwater robotic videos from the spent fuel pool that don't exist. The video appears to show large amounts of debris contaminating the pool based on water samples that you can't get close to, even if it did exist, unnamed. Experts and nationalized TEPCO reported that the fuel rods were left largely undamaged in a building that doesn't even exist. There's just a stump left. The fuel pools are at the top of 190-foot buildings, by the way. You don't know what evil is until you hang around here for a while. The external dose calculation system and reduction factors for cloud source were adopted from the calculations from the 12th to the 14th of March. For the period of the 15th of March and after, the factors for deposited radioactivity were applied in calculations. The values were 0.4, 0.2, 0.1 for 1 or 2 story wood frame homes, and 1 or 2 story cement houses and buildings, and 3 or more story cement buildings, respectively. Microsieverts. The effective dose for children can be calculated by multiplying E by C by age. I think all of these people should be arrested and sent in to the nuclear meltdowns immediately, and that their children should be taken away from them immediately, that they have no rights. They've abrogated their responsibilities a long time ago. Evil only survives when people sit in silence. And the silence is deafening right now. Academics should put a picture of a big shit stain or something in Wikipedia when you see the word academic. Anybody knows how to edit Wikipedia? You can get right onto that for us. I'm actually ashamed to say I'm a human today. This haunted me for the last couple of days, so I'm glad that I made this video and got it edited away. And it's probably one of the most important videos for documentations you're ever going to find of what really is going on. The people that signed their name there made a small fortune doing that too, by the way. Yeah. I'm just going to let it go there, I guess, tonight, because I'm not fit to keep this video going. I'm just going to get incredibly upset. I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow night. What a fucked up planet this is. See, that's what I mean. I'm not fit to be here now. External dose estimation system for the victims. See, this is why we got the death penalty, right? Is to be a deterrent to these monsters. Japan actually has hanging. They can still hang these creatures, whatever they are. They're not human. And they should. Except there is no functional governments. There is no functional... There really isn't any media whatsoever. This is what we do. We cover for years and years and years. We cover the cycle of lies, and we do the research of radiation fallout, the most important facet. It's just disappointing to know that these people are breathing the same air as me and you. It's disappointing, yeah? Well, we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Everybody have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. We'll probably jump back into those videos tomorrow night. There's some amazing stuff there. So we had a heavy snow yesterday and heavy, heavy rain all day today. The whole winter's been like that, hasn't it? It's just never heard tell of anything like it. And that all week long we're going to get snow each day. Strangest weather. I've never seen anything like that. I don't have no memories of anything like this before. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Next plume is on its way, folks. That earthquake means we got a plume coming. It's going to be here today or tomorrow. My Geiger counter of 352 counts. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.